any confusion as to what's being sent because of the font may look a little bit different depending on what's being written in there. So we'll keep these consistent. Now I need to go ahead and change this button's name so I can use it in code. Now instead of TXT, we're going to use BTN, which stands for button, and I'm going to call it send. So now we have everything set. Everything's named, and we're ready to now go in the code behind to be able to start editing this. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to do a rapid double click on this button here. When we do that, we'll get this window that pops up with the name of the button. So you have to ensure that you do all this stuff first here on the form before you go back into the code to start editing anything. Now the first thing I like to do is to make sure that I have a connection between these two. So first I am going to go ahead and create my subroutine that's going to be running all my HTML code. So I'm going to say sub send as HTML email. All right, so now I have this send as HTML email. And then I can actually, I'm going to say MSG box. So I'm just doing a test to make sure I have it. Send email. I'm doing a visual test. I just want to see something work before I move on. And I like to do this a lot of times. It's almost like error checking or you know, test-driven development in a way on a smaller scale. To make sure that we are on the right page as we move forward, as opposed to moving too far forward and finding out nothing was connected. So now I'm going to go back here onto my form, and I'm going to get out of design mode, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit send. And that's exactly what I expected to happen, because this is not connected to the button. So if something were to happen and I expected nothing to happen, that would be an error in a way. So now I'm going to go back here and I'm going to add this right here inside of the button. So that way the button can now run this function. So when I click on the button now, it's going to go ahead and run this function. Now I'm expecting something to happen. So I go back here, I'm out of design mode, and I click on that and it says send email. Perfect. So now I want to make sure that I'm getting the information out of these text boxes, so that way, so I'm going to leave this part here and I'm going to start changing information inside of here. I want to make sure I'm getting these text boxes and all this information that's in these text boxes. So I'm going to dim myself those text boxes. I'm going to create a variable that's going to hold that information. So I'm going to say dim. You can say S recipient. I really don't like doing that. S meaning for string, but I'm just going to say recipient. So I'm just going to dim that as a string. And if you're not familiar, dimming it as a string just is making a variable that's going to hold some information. Then I'm going to dim myself the subject as a string. Now, these here are variables, and in a way they're private variables, so really I shouldn't have these capitalized in keeping with the structure that we had before, like the B and T send. So really these probably should be lowercase. And now what I want to do is I want to take what's inside of the recipient, which is email to, and the subject, which is this email subject, and I want to put it inside of there. And the way I do that is I just call those names, because remember, when I was here, I'm going to get into the design view. When I was here inside of the properties, I gave this a name called txt mail to, and I called this one txt subject. So I'm going to add those in there by directly calling them. That's why I named them txt, and now all I have to do is mail to. txt mail to is what I'm taking the information from, and I'm putting it inside of the recipient. So I'm technically taking this and putting what's in txt mail to inside the recipient. I had to create the recipient first, and now I can take what's inside of that to put it in the recipient. And I don't just want the object of the recipient, I want what's inside the recipient, which is the text. So I have to say dot text. So basically this says I'm taking this object called txtmail2, as we can see here, that's the object, and I want to go inside that object and get the text property and put that inside the recipient. And that's how we were able to do that. I want to do the exact same thing for the subject. So basically I'm going to say the subject equals txt subject dot text. Now, if these work, I know I'm on the right page, so I'm going to go ahead and do a MSG box again. And I'm going to say it equals recipient and the subject. So this should give me both these two, whatever's in these boxes, but it's going to be smashed together, but this is just a test, so I at least should see both of those inside of a message box. So I'm going to go back here, I'm going to get out of design mode, and I'm going to type something up in here, gmail.com, and then I'm going to go to the subject. This is my first word email. And now I'm going to click on send, and I'm getting an error here, so let's see what the error is. So it looks like if I go here to design, we go to the properties, I'm going to look over these names again and look at this. This says txt email to, and this one says txt mail to. So that's I'm glad we actually ran into that, so you guys can actually see the importance of these names. I completely had the name wrong there, so I'm sure that that was the error. So let's see what happens when we try this again. Get out of design mode and hit send, and there we have it. We have that information there with the Gmail account, well, the fake email account, plus that information. And as we suspected, it was going to be smashed together because we just added those two. So now what we want to do is check to see, create a function to check to see if Outlook is actually open. So right now this test is pretty good. Actually, it's perfect, and I can remove that out of there because I'm not going to have a message box pop up. So these obviously work. I'm going to create another function down here, and I'm going to call that function, I'm going to make it as a public function, and I'm going to call it is Outlook. And it's going to return Boolean. And if you don't quite understand this, I'm not going to go into too much detail because that's not the point. The point is to have something working. But for right now, understand that this is the same as a procedure, except it returns something. So understand it that way for now. And inside of here, what we're going to do, this code is just going to help us check to see if Outlook is open. And if it is open, go ahead and close it, and then continue with the process. So it's not going to make it continue with the process. It's just going to check to see if Outlook is open, and that's why it's called is Outlook, meaning it's a question. So first let's check for the errors, and if there is an error, we're going to go ahead and resume the process. So I'm going to say on error, resume next. And then I'm going to call this within itself, and then I am going to proclaim that it is null, or it's not, it doesn't exist. Put that object inside of there, and that object is called Outlook application. And then I'm going to make that is nothing. Now you'll notice what I did here. I was typing this, and I purposely, because I know VBA is actually a case sensitive application, but it'll format the text if it's right. So when I did the is nothing, I did all of that in lowercase, because I do know it's an uppercase. If I go to the end of this line, I hit enter, and it does not reformat it, I know that there's something wrong. So that's one way to check to see if you're actually writing the correct thing or not. And so now down here, I'm going to say this is going to be, I want to call LBL exit here. And this is if there's an error. And then I'm going to want to exit this function. So watch, I'm going to do this in lowercase, exit function, and it goes in uppercase, and then I already have my end function down here. So that's already going to check to see if Outlook is actually open, and we needed to do this so we can use that inside of this procedure up here. So let's go ahead and write how this is going to be used. So the question is, if is, I'm going to do this all in lowercase, is equals false, then, and as you can see, it recognized this function, the same function I wrote down here, and it put it all in uppercase. Just leave it like that, and I need this to be in quotes. And if that is true, I want it to go the same place this is going. So I will say go to now. If there was an error, I still want it to continue on. So down here, let me put a little message here, like a comment. I'm going to say, if Outlook So now I'm going to create this variable here called Outlook application. And then I'm going to create a new Outlook application here. So this is almost like opening up Outlook and grabbing it. Now, if Outlook was not open, I want to check for any errors because that's what's going to happen if it's not open. I'm going to get an error. And if it equals 0, then I'm going to hit enter and then end if. If you notice, I really like opening and closing these if statements and any other parameters that I'm, any other function or procedure that I'm currently using. I like to open and close it first. So I'm going to say if Outlook was not open, started from VBA code. I'm going to set Outlook, the Outlook application that I just made, this one right here. I'm going to take that and I'm going to go ahead and set it as another object called Outlook. And the truth is, this one right here takes two parameters. So the first parameter actually is not set here. So I'm going to put a little, there we go. Put a comma there. And then on this one, I won't need to have two parameters. So I'm just going to say create object. Actually, I'm taking this exact same thing here without this here.